Some whispered his uncle's position as state judge greased the wheels. Others figured Copper Creek was just desperate after their last sheriff vanished without a trace. But here's something the Black Snake Syndicate never counted on. Sometimes, the deadliest lawman is the one who learned to shoot in the shadows of war, not the streets of the West. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure that subscribe button is hit. Because tomorrow's episode reveals a twist that'll change everything you think you know about modern-day sheriffs. Copper Creek wasn't the kind of place that showed up on GPS maps. Nestled in the heart of Arizona's Superstition Mountains, where ancient Apache trails wound through saguaro forests and abandoned gold mines, it was a town where dawn painted the desert in watercolor shades of purple and gold, where ranchers still drove cattle past solar farms, and where the local diner served both authentic Mexican tamales and cryptocurrency mining advice. For generations, the biggest excitement in Copper Creek came from two things: the annual Frontier Days rodeo, where old-timers relived the glory days of the Wild West, and the occasional lost hiker needing rescue from the labyrinth of narrow canyons that surrounded the town. The locals liked it that way. Quiet, predictable, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business but pretended they didn't. Even the installation of the town's first high-speed internet tower last year barely caused a ripple in the daily rhythm of life. That changed the day the first black motorcycle roared into town, its chrome snake emblem catching the merciless summer sun. The rider, clad in matte black leather that seemed to absorb the desert heat, didn't stop at Rosa's diner like most travelers. Instead, they circled Main Street 3 times, the bike's custom exhaust cutting through the usual morning quiet like a rattlesnake's warning. Sheriff Daniel "Danny" Hawkins stood at his office window, watching tumbleweeds dance across the empty Main Street as another 110-degree morning dawned. 2 weeks into his position as the youngest sheriff in Copper Creek's history, at just 27, he was already facing what the old-timers were calling the biggest threat since the great copper mine collapse of '92. His reflection stared back at him, dark eyes haunted by 3 tours as a special forces sniper, a face too young for the badge. Some folks said he'd gotten through pure luck rather than the kind of experience they thought a sheriff needed. But those same folks didn't know about the medals buried in his footlocker, or the classified missions that had taught him patience was deadlier than any quick draw. They hadn't seen him track targets through the mountains of Afghanistan, hadn't witnessed the stillness he could maintain for days while waiting for the perfect shot. To them, he was just the kid who'd grown up on the outskirts of town, more comfortable with computers than cowboys, who somehow ended up wearing the star his father had died trying to protect 15 years ago. "Another bike spotted on Route 60, Sheriff," Deputy Maria Sandoval announced, her boots echoing on the station's wooden floors as she dropped a fresh report on his desk. The veteran officer's voice carried that familiar edge of doubt, the same skepticism he'd been fighting since day one. "Black Snake tags on the saddlebags. That makes 8 this week." Danny picked up the report, jaw tightening as he studied the surveillance photos. Route 60 wasn't just any road. It was the main artery connecting Copper Creek to the outside world, the same route his father had been patrolling the night he encountered what everyone assumed was just another lost tourist. The images showed a sleek black motorcycle, its rider's helmet adorned with the same snake emblem that had been appearing more frequently around town. "They're getting bolder," Chief Deputy Jack Turner observed, his weathered face grim as he joined them. 30 years on the force had left silver streaks in his black hair and deep lines around his eyes that deepened whenever he looked at Danny, which was more often lately. Started with just passing through, then hanging around Rosa's. Now they're marking territory. State police called again, offering support. The suggestion hung in the air like gun smoke in a saloon, a subtle vote of no confidence wrapped in professional courtesy. Danny spread the surveillance photos across his desk, eyes moving with practiced precision. Where others saw random bikers, he saw patterns. His time as a military sniper hadn't just taught him how to shoot, it had taught him how to read situations, to see the story behind the chaos. "No," he replied firmly, tapping one particular photo. "The Black Snakes are making a mistake, and calling in outside help would only prove what they're trying to tell this town, that we can't handle our own problems." Maria leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Enlighten us, rookie. What could you possibly see that 40 years of combined law enforcement experience is missing?" Danny pointed to a distinctive scratch on one of the motorcycles. "Look at the bike markings. This one belongs to their enforcer, Marcus Viper Cruz. He's left-handed. You can tell from the way the brake cables are customized. But the bike spotted this morning? Those modifications were done by someone right-handed. He grabbed a ruler, making quick measurements. And the height of the rider, Cruz, is 6'4". This rider can't be more than 5 or 10. The Black Snakes are splintering. These aren't coordinated movements anymore. They're internal power plays." Jack leaned in closer, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. "Go on. What else?" "The Black Snakes are fracturing," Danny continued, pulling up photos from previous sightings. "These reconnaissance runs aren't coordinated anymore. They're competing. Factions testing our response times. Victor the Serpent Reyes is challenging Marcus Cruz's leadership. That's why these appearances are getting more frequent, more erratic. They're not just probing our defenses, they're trying to prove themselves to each other." The conversation was interrupted by Rosa bursting into the office. Her usual sunny demeanor replaced by barely contained fear. The owner of Rosa's diner wasn't just any business owner. She was Copper Creek's unofficial mayor, the keeper of secrets shared over morning coffee and green chili breakfast burritos. "Sheriff, they threaten my grandson," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and terror. "Two of them at the diner said if I don't start letting them use my back room for their meetings, they'll make sure little Miguel never makes it home from school again." The diner wasn't just any business, it was Copper Creek's heart. 3 generations of miners, ranchers, and desert rats had found refuge in its air-conditioned haven. The Black Snakes had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Danny checked his holster with practiced efficiency, the same motion he'd performed thousands of times before, taking a shot in the mountains of Kandahar. "They think I'm some kind of joke," he said quietly, "a rookie sheriff who got lucky. But every time they underestimate me, they make another mistake. And this time, they just made their biggest one yet." The morning crowd at Rosa's had thinned to a few regulars when Danny pushed through the door, the bell's cheerful jingle contrasting with the tension in the air. Old-timers nursed coffee cups, speaking in hushed tones about the Black Snake's latest threats. The usually bustling establishment felt subdued, like a dust storm brewing just beyond the horizon. "Well, if it ain't the boy playing sheriff," a gravelly voice called out. Marcus Viper Cruz sat at the counter, his black leather vest adorned, with the snake patch, a half-eaten plate of huevos rancheros before him. 2 other riders flanked him, their motorcycles parked prominently outside the window, chrome glinting like drawn weapons in the desert sun. "Heard you've been studying our movements, Sheriff," Cruz continued, his scarred face reflected in the diner's chrome backsplash. "Fancy yourself some kind of tactical genius after playing soldier." Danny moved deliberately, positioning himself with clear sightlines to all 3 men. His posture seemed relaxed, but years of special forces training had taught him to maintain a shooter's stance without telegraphing it. "Just admiring the technique, Marcus. Though I noticed your boys are getting sloppy. Might want to coordinate better with your right-handed riders next time." Cruz's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You got a smart mouth for a rookie. Maybe that's why Victor thinks you're more trouble than you're worth." "Miguel, go help your abuela in the back," Danny called out to Rosa's grandson, who was wiping down tables nearby. The teenager hesitated, then caught the sheriff's stern look and disappeared into the kitchen. The diner had gone silent, the remaining customers watching the exchange, with the kind of wary attention usually reserved for rattlesnakes. The ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, doing little to dispel the growing tension, sending the kid away. Cruz smirked, standing slowly, afraid he might see something unpleasant, just making sure he doesn't have to testify about what happens. Next, Danny replied evenly. You threatened a child today, Marcus, in my town. Did Victor authorize that, or are you freelancing now? The question hit like a precision round. Cruz's companions exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their postures. Danny pressed the advantage, recognizing the same tells he'd learned to spot through a sniper scope, the subtle shifts in body language that telegraphed intent before action. What's that supposed to mean? Cruz demanded. But there was a new edge in his voice, not fear, but the kind of doubt that could shatter a chain of command. It means we both know Victor doesn't target children. It's bad for business, draws too much attention, which makes me wonder, are you trying to force his hand, or are you just losing control? Cruz's face contorted with rage. Or what, Sheriff? You're going to show us that famous marksmanship we keep hearing about? This ain't the sandbox, boy. This is the real world. Danny's response was so quiet the bikers had to lean in to hear him. Marcus, if you reach for that gun under your vest, you'll find out exactly why 3 different terrorist cells put bounties on Ghost Shot before they ever knew my real name. Something in his tone, perhaps the absolute certainty, or maybe the complete lack of bravado, made Cruz hesitate. His eyes met Danny's and saw something that made him step back. Without breaking eye contact, he pulled out his wallet, dropped some bills on the counter, and muttered what might have been an apology in Rosa's direction. As the bikers filed out, their bravado notably diminished. Jack moved beside Danny. You knew they wouldn't draw. How? Danny watched through the window as the motorcycles roared to life, their exhausts echoing off the adobe walls like distant thunder. Cruz likes to project strength, but he's cautious. More importantly, he just confirmed something I suspected. Victor Reyes didn't authorize these escalations, which means the Black Snakes are about to have some internal problems we can use to our advantage. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, Miguel close behind her. Sheriff, she began, but Danny raised a hand. Rosa, I need you to close early today. Then I need you to call a town meeting. It's time Copper Creek understood what we're really dealing with and what we're going to do about it. A dust devil danced across Main Street, lifting tumbleweeds and desert debris in its spiral. A storm was coming to Copper Creek, but Danny Hawkins had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to weather a storm was to become its eye, the quiet center around which chaos spun, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The town hall meeting was packed, every folding chair filled, with people standing 3 deep along the walls of the old adobe building. The late afternoon sun slanted through high windows, painting stripes of gold across worried faces. Danny stood at the podium, surveying the crowd. Ranchers, shop owners, tech workers who'd moved to Copper Creek for the promise of quiet desert living. All of them looking to their young sheriff for answers. 3 weeks ago, Danny began, his voice carrying to every corner, the Black Snake Syndicate thought they found an easy target. A small town with a rookie sheriff, far from any major city. Last week they marked 4 businesses. Yesterday they threatened a child. Today they learned that Copper Creek isn't as soft as they thought. He moved to a large digital display, now showing a map marked with red dots indicating every Black Snake sighting since their arrival. But what they don't know is that every act of intimidation, every show of force has been giving us exactly what we need to take them down. Deputy Sandoval stepped forward, distributing tablets to the town council. The Black Snakes aren't just a gang, she explained, her earlier skepticism replaced by professional focus. They're a sophisticated criminal organization in the middle of a power struggle. Victor Reyes built them on a strict code. No targeting families, no excessive violence, but Marcus Cruz is trying to change that. Which means, Jack added, his weathered face illuminated by the screens. They're getting sloppy, making mistakes, and our sheriff here has been documenting every single one. Danny clicked through a series of surveillance images, thermal camera footage from the desert, traffic cam shots, drone photographs. They think they're watching us, but we've been watching them. Every movement they've made, every threat they've issued, it's all evidence. But we need your help to spring the trap. Old Bill Henderson stood up, his rancher's bearing still evident despite his years. What kind of help, Sheriff? Because I've got my rifle ready. Not that kind, Danny replied firmly. The Black Snakes are expecting violence. They're counting on it. What they don't expect is a community that stands together, he nodded to Rosa. Tell them about your idea. Rosa rose, still wearing her diner apron. The diner's always been neutral ground. Everybody eats there, ranchers, coders, even those bikers. I'm offering to host a Southwest Heritage Festival next weekend. Free food, live music, the works. The kind of event that'll draw everyone out. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Danny raised his hand for silence. The Black Snakes will see it as a sign of weakness, a town trying to pretend everything's normal. They won't be able to resist making a statement. But here's what they don't know. He nodded to Maria, who wheeled out a large case. Inside was sophisticated surveillance equipment, thermal imaging devices, directional microphones, and compact drones. Before I became a sheriff, Danny explained, I specialized in counter-insurgency tactics. Every vendor at that festival will be an off-duty officer from surrounding counties. Every food truck will house surveillance equipment, and when Cruz makes his move against Reyes's leadership, we'll have everything on camera. You're using us. As bait, someone called out. No, Danny corrected. I'm asking you to show them what they've never understood, that real strength isn't about fear, it's about community. Every time they've attacked, this town has pulled together. Now we're going to use that unity to end this. He outlined the security measures, the evacuation plans, the coordination with state police who would be positioned just outside town. But more importantly, he explained how each business owner, each resident, had a part to play in maintaining the illusion of a town too naive to realize it was walking into a confrontation. There's something else, Jack added, something new in his voice, respect, something the Black Snakes don't know about our sheriff. Want to tell them, Danny, or should I? Danny hesitated, then nodded. Before I took this badge, I served as a special forces sniper. They never found out who Ghost Shot was, the operator who could take out a target from 2 miles away in a sandstorm. I've been downplaying it, letting them think the stories about my service were exaggerated. Next weekend, if Cruz forces a confrontation, he's going to learn differently. The meeting continued late into the evening. Questions answered, concerns addressed, roles assigned. As people filed out, there was a new energy in the air, not the nervous tension of recent weeks, but the quiet determination of a community that had found its strength. Rosa lingered behind, Miguel at her side. Sheriff, are you sure about this, using my diner as the centerpiece? Danny checked his weapon, a habit that had become almost unconscious. The Black Snakes think they understand power. They're about to learn that real power isn't in how many people fear you. It's in how many stand beside you. Thunder rumbled. In the distance, rare for the desert but clear. In 6 days, Copper Creek would either break free from the Black Snake's grip, or... Danny pushed the alternative from his mind. Failure wasn't an option, not with his town counting on him. The pieces were in motion. The trap was set, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, two rival gang leaders were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives, underestimating a sheriff who had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. The best week before the Southwest Heritage Festival passed like a game of high-stakes chess, each piece moving into position with calculated precision. Danny watched from his office as Rosa's staff hung colorful papel picado across Main Street, the traditional Mexican paper decorations masking the carefully positioned surveillance equipment beneath. His desk was covered with surveillance photos, incident reports, and a detailed 3D rendering of the festival layout on his laptop. Each vendor location had been carefully chosen to maximize coverage while maintaining clear evacuation routes, the same tactical planning he'd used in Afghanistan, now deployed to protect a small desert town. Black Snake spotted at the county line, Maria reported, entering with fresh intel. 12 bikes, including Cruz and his inner circle. Reyes's group was seen heading in from the opposite direction. Looking like your prediction about their split is dead on. Danny nodded, checking. His custom Glock for the 100th time that morning. The familiar weight offered small comfort. And our backup? State police units are positioned at all approach routes, disguised as roadwork crews. FBI tactical team is standing by 20 minutes out. Undercover officers are setting up their vendor booths now. She paused, studying him. You really think Cruz will make his move against Reyes here? He doesn't have a choice, Danny replied, marking another position on the digital map. Reyes has been asking questions about the unauthorized intimidation, the escalating violence. Cruz needs to make a show of force before his support crumbles. What better way than taking over in front of the whole town? Jack entered, his weathered face grave. Just got word from our informant inside the gang. Cruz has been promising his supporters bigger cuts of the gun-running operation, less oversight. He's got maybe 20 riders ready to flip on Reyes, but here's the concerning part. They've been asking around about military-grade explosives. Danny's jaw tightened. He'd anticipated violence, but this raised the stakes considerably. They're not just planning a confrontation. Cruz wants to make a statement, something public, something that shows Copper Creek what happens to towns. That resist, Rosa burst in, her usual calm shattered. Sheriff, 2 of Cruz's men just left the diner. They were talking about making sure tomorrow's festival is one nobody forgets. They didn't know Miguel was in the back, heard everything. They're planning something big at the bandstand. That's what I'm counting on, Danny said, pulling up architectural plans of the festival grounds. Rosa, remember how we reinforced your diner's basement last week? We didn't just do that for storage. He turned to his team, energy radiating from his lean frame. Cruz thinks he's planning a coup. What he doesn't know is that every step he takes brings him closer to a trap 6 months in the making. Officer Chen appeared, carrying cases of communication equipment. Surveillance systems are in place, Sheriff. Every vendor booth has thermal imaging. Motion sensors cover all blind spots. If anyone so much as sneezes wrong tomorrow, we'll know. About it, Danny moved to the evidence wall where photos tracked the Black Snake's activities since their arrival. Tomorrow isn't just about stopping a gang war. It's about showing Copper Creek and every town like it that you don't need an army to stand against intimidation. Sometimes all you need is a community willing to stand together. And a sheriff crazy enough to use a heritage festival as bait, Maria finished, but there was respect in her voice now. They underestimate small towns, Danny said quietly, checking his backup weapon. Think we're stuck in the past. Easy targets. By tomorrow night, they'll understand why insurgents in 3 countries used to evacuate entire regions when they heard Ghost Shot was in position. He glanced at the tactical vest hidden beneath his civilian clothes, the same one he'd worn on his last deployment, now repurposed for a different kind of war. The ceramic plates were newer, rated for the kind of firepower the Black Snakes were known to carry. But his most important weapon wasn't the rifle currently being assembled in the diner's basement. It was the network of trust he'd built, person by person, over the past 6 months. "Latest drone footage," Chen announced, pulling up thermal images on the main screen. "Cruz's advanced scouts are already setting up observation points around town. They think they're being subtle." Danny studied the heat signatures, recognizing patterns he'd seen before in different deserts. They're using military-style recon formations. Someone in Cruz's crew has training. Maria checked service records for his known associates. "Already did," she replied, sliding over a tablet. "Remember that dishonorable discharge you flagged last month? James Rattler Martinez, ex-Army Rangers. He's been seen riding with Cruz's faction. That explains the professionalism in their recent movements," Danny mused. "But it also means they'll be expecting standard law enforcement responses. They won't be ready for counter-insurgency tactics." Thunder rolled across the desert as the team dispersed for final preparations. Danny remained at the window, watching storm clouds gather over the Superstition mountains. Tomorrow would test not just his skills with a rifle, but everything he believed about community, justice, and the kind of courage it takes to stand against those who rule through fear. The rookie sheriff they'd all doubted was about to show the Black Snakes exactly why you should never judge a person's capabilities by their years on the job. But more importantly, he was going to show them why attempting to intimidate a small town could be the last mistake a criminal organization ever makes. The morning of the Southwest Heritage Festival dawned blood red, the sun rising through dust, clouds that painted Copper Creek in shades of crimson. Danny stood in the command center they'd established in Rosa's reinforced basement, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from every camera positioned around the festival grounds. "All units check in," he commanded through the secure radio channel, each response painting a tactical picture in his mind. Sandoval at the north entrance, clear. Turner covering the bandstand, in position. Chen at the food court, all vendors. Accounted for. State police units standing by at all exit points. The festival was coming to life above them, the smell of cooking meat and fresh tortillas drifting down even to the basement. Families began trickling in, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension humming through the law enforcement network. First, "Black Snake spotted," Maria's voice crackled. "Cruz's group, 12 bikes. They're splitting up, taking positions around the perimeter just like you predicted, Sheriff." "And Reyes coming in from the south," Jack reported. "Looks like he brought his whole crew. This could get ugly fast." "Keep your positions," Danny ordered, his voice steady. "Remember, we need them all in place before we move. Rosa, how's the crowd control going?" "The church youth group is doing a good job keeping families toward the designated safe zones," Rosa's voice came through clear. "Nobody suspects a thing." Danny checked his weapon one final time, the familiar motion centering him. Years of Special Forces operations had taught him that the moment before action was often more dangerous than the action itself. That's when mistakes happened. "Movement at the bandstand," Chen called out urgently. "Cruz's men are unloading something. From their saddlebags, thermals showing. Sheriff, those look like explosive components." "Right on schedule," Danny replied, his voice deadly calm. "Thompson, confirm Reyes's location. He's just past the tamale stand, heading straight for Cruz. Got at least 15 riders with him." Danny stood, adjusting his tactical vest beneath, his Western-style shirt. "All units execute Phase 1. Maria, start the music." The opening chords of a mariachi band blasted through the festival speakers, masking the sound of tactical teams moving into position. Through the monitors, Danny watched as Victor Reyes confronted Cruz near the bandstand, their body language screaming hostility even without audio. "They're arguing," Maria reported. "Cruz just shoved Reyes, weapon spotted. At least 8 riders, reaching for guns. Wait for my mark, Danny commanded, already moving up the basement stairs. Remember, we need to contain this before any civilians are at risk. He emerged into the sunlight just as the first shot rang out. The crack of gunfire cut through the music, followed by screams as festival-goers began running. But thanks to their preparation, the evacuation routes were clear, volunteer teams calmly guiding people to safety. "Sheriff!" Cruz's voice boomed across the festival ground. "You wanted to see real power. Watch what happens to towns that don't learn their place." Danny stepped into the open, his stance relaxed but ready. Years of combat had taught him that tension was the enemy of accuracy. "Marcus," he called out, "I was hoping we could do this. The easy way." "The easy way," Cruz laughed, holding up a detonator. "Like how you played us, thinking we wouldn't figure out your little trap?" "Oh, I was counting on you figuring it out," Danny replied, his voice carrying across the now empty festival ground. "Just like I was counting on you bringing those explosives. The ones you bought from a supplier who works for us." Cruz's face contorted with rage and disbelief. He squeezed the detonator, but nothing happened. In that moment of confusion, Danny moved. Later, witnesses would say it was like watching a ghost. One moment the sheriff was standing still, the next his gun had cleared leather and fired 3 times with impossible precision. The detonator shattered in Cruz's hand, his backup weapon spinning away before he could even grip it properly. "That's why they called me Ghost Shot," Danny said into the stunned silence. "Now, about that power you wanted to show the town." The trap had been sprung. The Black Snakes were about to learn that sometimes the deadliest force isn't the one that makes the most noise. It's the one they never saw coming until it was too late. Thunder rolled across the desert, but this time it sounded like victory approaching. The rookie sheriff they'd tried to intimidate was about to show them that in the modern West, the quickest draw isn't always about speed. Sometimes it's about patience, planning, and the power of a community united against fear. Time seemed to slow in the aftermath of Danny's shots. Cruz stared at his shattered detonator, blood trickling from where fragments had cut his hand. Around the festival grounds, both factions of Black Snakes stood frozen, weapons half drawn as they processed what they'd just witnessed. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle flutter of torn papal picado in the hot desert wind. "Those were warning shots," Danny announced, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. "The next ones won't be. Everyone, weapons down, now." His stance remained relaxed but balanced, years of combat experience evident in every subtle movement. Victor. Reyes was the first to move but not to surrender. His hand flashed toward his vest, the motion telegraphing his intent to someone with Danny's training. "Kill this badge-wearing ghost!" Danny's response was pure reflex, muscle memory from thousands of hours of combat operations. 3 shots rang, out in rapid succession, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Reyes's gun went flying, along with 2 others from his closest supporters. The weapons hit the dirt before the echo of the shots had faded, spinning in the dust like deadly fallen stars. "That's 6 shots," Danny said calmly, his Glock still training steady. Even in the desert heat, his hands didn't shake. "I've got 11 more in the magazine, and I promise you, there's nobody here faster or more accurate than me. So let's talk about what happens next." Through his earpiece, Danny could hear his team coordinating their response. Maria's voice crackled with controlled urgency. "State police moving in from all sides. FBI tactical team 60 seconds out. Chen reports all civilian areas secured." "Your explosives are duds," Danny continued, addressing both gang leaders while scanning for subtle shifts in the crowd of bikers. His peripheral vision caught nervous glances between gang members, hands hovering uncertainly near weapons. "Your escape routes are blocked, and every single thing that's happened here is being recorded. But here's what you don't know yet. Your supplier, the one who sold you those explosives, he works for us. Has been for months, and he's got recordings of every conversation, every plan, every detail of your operation." Cruz sneered, though his bravado was cracking like old leather. In the sun. "You're bluffing, Sheriff. No rookie pulls off something this big. You're just some burned-out soldier playing cop in the desert." Danny allowed himself a small smile, the kind he used to wear before taking impossible shots in far-off mountains. "That's your problem, Marcus. You saw what you wanted to see, a young sheriff, an easy target. You never asked why someone with my background would choose a small town like Copper Creek. Never wondered why a special forces operator would trade a career in private security for a badge in the desert." Jack emerged from his position, covering the left flank with the steady hands of a 30-year veteran. "Tell them, Danny. Tell them why they called you Ghost Shot in the service." 4 years in special operations," Danny replied, his aim never wavering. The desert sun cast his shadow long across the festival ground, a dark line between order and chaos. 37 confirmed eliminations of high-value targets. The record for the longest confirmed combat shot in Afghanistan still stands. 2,815 meters through a sandstorm. I could have gone anywhere after my discharge, joined any tactical unit in the country, but I chose this instead. Because sometimes the best way to protect people isn't from behind a sniper scope. It's from behind a badge in a place everyone else has forgotten. The sound of sirens filled the air as state police vehicles converged on the festival ground, their wails echoing off the adobe walls. FBI tactical teams deployed in practiced formation, securing the perimeter with the kind of precision that came from countless operations. But Danny kept his focus on the gang leaders, knowing these next moments were crucial. "You've got 2 choices," he continued, voice level despite the tension crackling through the air. "Surrender now, face federal charges for attempted domestic terrorism." Or, he let the alternative hang in the air like a mirage. Reyes broke first, his facade of power crumbling faster than a mud wall in a flash flood. "Stand down!" he ordered his men, dropping his backup weapon. "This town ain't worth dying for." His eyes met Danny's, and there was something like recognition there. One trained killer acknowledging another. Cruz looked around wildly, seeing his power play crumbling. With a roar of rage that seemed to shake the very ground, he lunged for a fallen gun. Danny's response was instantaneous, 2 shots perfectly placed. The first knocked the weapon away in a spray of desert dust. The second kicked up dirt inches from Cruz's reaching hand, close enough to make him feel the heat of the round's passage. 8 shots, Danny counted calmly, the Glock's barrel tracking Cruz's every movement. "Still 10 left. Want to try for 9? I can do this all day, Marcus. The question is, can you? The fight drained from Cruz's face like water in the desert. Around the festival ground, black snakes were raising their hands, accepting the inevitable. Maria and Jack moved in with handcuffs, while FBI teams secured the explosive devices with practiced efficiency. Rosa emerged from the diner basement, Miguel close behind, her face a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "Sheriff, the surveillance footage is secured. Every second, from every angle. They'll never be able to deny what happened here." Danny finally lowered his weapon, watching as the gang members were led away. The festival lay in disarray around them, scattered paper decorations dancing in the wind, overturned stands casting strange shadows, abandoned food carts still steaming in the afternoon heat. But no casualties, no civilian injuries. The plan had worked perfectly. "You know," Jack said, joining him, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, "when they appointed you, I thought the town council had lost their mind. A special forces hotshot playing sheriff in a town most people can't find on a map. But now I understand. You didn't just bring marksmanship to Copper Creek. You brought strategy, patience, and something these riders never understood." "What's that?" Danny asked, holstering his weapon with the smooth motion of someone who had done it thousands of times before. The understanding that true power isn't about how fast you can pull a trigger. It's about knowing when you need to. And more importantly, when you don't. Thunder rolled in the distance, but this time it sounded more like applause. Copper Creek had faced down its threat, not just through the speed of its sheriff's draw, but through the strength of a community united against fear. The victory celebration was cut short by Maria's urgent call. "Sheriff," she shouted from the command center, "you need to see this. We've been going through Cruz's phone records. The calls don't just go to other gang members. There's a pattern of communication with someone in state government." Danny's tactical mind, honed by years of tracking enemy movements across multiple continents, shifted into high gear. Show me everything, every call, every text, every connection. As the sun set over the Superstition Mountains, casting long shadows across the festival grounds, Danny realized that taking down the Black Snakes might have been just the beginning. Something bigger was stirring in the desert, a conspiracy that reached far beyond motorcycle gangs and small-town intimidation. The rookie sheriff, who had outshot 2 gang leaders, was about to face a different kind of war. One where the enemies wore suits instead of leather, and the battles would be fought, not with bullets but with the truth. A war that would test not just his marksmanship, but everything he believed about justice, power, and the true meaning of serving and protecting. Maria spread the phone logs across Danny's desk, each document telling part of a disturbing story. The command center's harsh fluorescent lights cast stark shadows across pages filled with call times, durations, and numbers that painted a picture of corruption reaching far beyond Copper Creek's town limits. "Look at the timing," she said, highlighting. "Key entries with practiced precision. Calls to this same number right before they moved into town. And not just any number. Direct line to State Police Special Operations Division. The pattern is unmistakable." Danny studied the records with the same intensity he once used to track insurgent movements across mountain ranges. His tactical mind categorized and connected each piece of information, building a comprehensive picture of the enemy's movements. Not just any division, Deputy Commissioner Wallace's direct line, the same office that recommended me for sheriff. "It gets worse," Jack added, entering with a stack of files thick enough to tell a novel's worth of conspiracy. His face was grim in the harsh light of the command center, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "FBI forensics found something interesting in those explosive components. They're military grade, the kind that doesn't just show up on the black market. Someone with serious connections was supplying them. The serial numbers match a batch that supposedly got destroyed in a depot fire last year." Danny stood, moving to his evidence wall, now hidden behind a false panel designed to look like old wanted posters. His fingers traced connections between photos, documents, and surveillance reports. "Because the Black Snakes weren't just a gang," he concluded, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "They were a test run. Someone wanted to see how small towns would respond to organized intimidation. The question is why?" Rosa appeared in the doorway, clutching a tablet like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Maybe this is why," she said, pulling up a news article that made Danny's blood run cold. The headline blazed across the screen. "State Emergency Response. Bill proposed. New powers for government intervention in local law enforcement." "Of course," Danny muttered, the pieces clicking into place like a precision rifle assembly. "Create a crisis, then offer the solution. The Black Snakes move in, terrorize small towns. And suddenly, there's public support for state-level oversight of local police. It's textbook psychological warfare. I saw the same tactics in Afghanistan, just with different players." "You're saying this goes all the way to the state capital?" Maria asked, incredulous. Her hand instinctively moved to her badge, as if questioning everything it represented. Danny picked up a high-resolution photo from his desk, the Black Snake's skull emblem captured from multiple angles. Look closer at the design, the art style, the precision, the specific psychological triggers embedded in the imagery. This isn't some biker gang tag. This is military psychological operations work. Someone wanted to make these towns feel helpless, and they hired professionals to do it. Chen rushed in, her laptop cradled like a lifeline, screen glowing with streams of data. "Sheriff, I've been tracing those encrypted communications. They bounce through servers across 3 states using military-grade encryption protocols. But they all lead back to one location, the State Police Special Operations Division, the same division that recommended you for sheriff. And here's the kicker. The encryption key matches ones used in classified operations overseas." "They thought they were placing a naive combat veteran in charge," Danny said quietly, remembering the condescending smiles during his interview. "Someone who'd fail spectacularly against organized crime. A puppet sheriff they could use to justify their takeover. Instead, they got someone who specialized in counterinsurgency and threat assessment." Jack finished, newfound respect in his voice. "Someone who spent years learning how to dismantle organizations exactly like this." Danny moved to the window, watching his town recover from yesterday's chaos. The festival decorations still hung limply in the desert breeze, but beneath them, he could see signs of resilience, shopkeepers reopening, children playing, life continuing despite the threat. The Black Snakes were just foot soldiers. The real threat wore suits and sat in government offices, but they'd made one crucial mistake. "What's that?" Rosa asked, worry lines creasing her forehead as she watched the same scene. "They assumed that because we're a small town, we'd be an easy target. They never understood that real strength doesn't come from state authority or gang intimidation. It comes from community, from people who've spent generations learning how to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth." The office door opened again, revealing FBI Special Agent Sarah Wilson, her suit as crisp as her expression was grave. "Sheriff Hawkins, we need to talk. Those connections you've uncovered, they go higher than you think, and you're not the only town they've targeted. This is bigger than any of us initially suspected." Danny checked his weapon, a habit now charged, with new meaning. The familiar weight of his Glock reminded him of longer battles, fought across different deserts. "How many others?" 8 towns across 4 states, Wilson replied, spreading a map across his desk. Red pins marked each target, forming a pattern that couldn't be coincidence. All hit by similar gangs, all facing the same pressure for state intervention. But Copper Creek was different. You didn't just stop their gang, you exposed their playbook, and now they're scrambling to contain the damage. Thunder rolled across the desert as Danny absorbed this information. The marksmanship skills that had helped him take down the Black Snakes wouldn't help against this enemy. This fight would require a different kind of precision, the rapid gathering of evidence, the swift building of alliances with other targeted communities. "They thought catching Cruz and Reyes was our endgame," Danny said, his voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "But everything we've done, the community programs, the surveillance network, the trust we've built, it's given us something they didn't expect." "What's that?" Maria asked, already sensing this was a turning point in their fight, a foundation to fight back. And this time, we're not just facing thugs on motorcycles. We're up against people who hide behind badges and government seals. People who've forgotten that the most dangerous weapon in America isn't a gun. It's the truth in the hands of people who aren't afraid to use it. Danny moved to his tactical planning board, the same one he'd used to coordinate the festival operation. But now, instead of marking sniper positions and evacuation routes, he began plotting a different kind of campaign. "First step," he said, his voice taking on the command tone that had once guided Special Forces teams through impossible missions. "We need to connect with the other targeted towns, share intelligence, coordinate responses. They tried to isolate us, but they just created a network of resistance." Already on it, Chen replied, fingers flying over her keyboard like she was conducting a digital orchestra. Setting up secure communication channels through old ham radio frequencies. They won't expect that. Too busy monitoring digital traffic. Sometimes the best way to beat high-tech surveillance is to go old school. Second, Maria added, catching Danny's strategy, we document everything, every call, every meeting, every connection between the Black Snakes and state officials. Build a case they can't bury. Create so many copies in so many places that trying to suppress it would be like trying to catch a sandstorm in your hands. The setting sun painted the desert in shades of fire, a fitting backdrop for the storm that was about to break. Danny Hawkins, the sheriff they'd tried to use as a pawn, was about to show them why some of history's greatest revolutions started in small towns where nobody was watching. The atmosphere in the emergency town council meeting crackled with tension, like heat lightning before a desert storm. Danny stood before Copper Creek's leaders in the old adobe council chamber, laying out evidence of the conspiracy that had brought the Black Snakes to their doorstep. The late afternoon sun slanted through high windows, casting long shadows across faces that had weathered everything from mining disasters to flash floods. But nothing quite like this. State Police Special Operations Division files, he announced, spreading documents across the weathered oak table that had served the town for 3 generations. Every town they targeted followed the same pattern. First, a manufactured crisis, then conveniently timed proposals for state intervention. This wasn't random. It was choreographed with military precision. Councilwoman Eleanor Hayes, who'd served Copper Creek for 3 decades and survived 2 attempts to buy out her family ranch, studied the files with growing alarm. Her hands, calloused from years of working the land, trembled slightly as she turned each page. "And you're saying someone in the state government orchestrated all this? Someone we trusted?" "Not just someone," FBI agent Wilson interjected, pulling up surveillance photos on the wall-mounted screen. The images showed carefully documented meetings, money transfers, and what appeared to be training sessions between state police officials and known Black Snake members. Commissioner Wallace, head of the State Emergency Response Committee. He's been pushing for legislation that would give his office direct control over local law enforcement in crisis situations. The Black Snakes were just his opening move. Danny pointed to a series of financial trails that Chen had uncovered through countless hours of digital forensics. The complex web of transactions spread across the screen like a spider's web catching the last rays of sunlight. The gang's weapons, their intel, even their tactical training, it all traces back to shell companies connected to Wallace's office. They're using organized crime to justify a power grab. But why? Mayor Phillips demanded, his voice echoing off the walls like a gunshot. What does he gain from controlling small-town police departments? We're barely a dot on the map out here. Control, Danny replied grimly, moving to his evidence board where strings connected photos, documents, and surveillance shots in a pattern that revealed the larger conspiracy. Start with law enforcement, then emergency services, then local governance. Create enough crisis situations and suddenly state oversight becomes permanent. But Wallace made 3 critical mistakes. He moved to the digital display, tapping key photographs that told the story of corruption reaching from street-level gangs all the way to the state capitol. First, he assumed a combat veteran wouldn't recognize military-grade tactical planning. The Black Snake's operations were too precise, too coordinated for a typical motorcycle gang. Second, he thought small towns would be isolated, easy to intimidate. But he forgot that out here survival depends on helping your neighbors. And third, a commotion outside interrupted him. Deputy Sandoval burst in, her expression urgent and her hand instinctively resting on her service weapon. "Sheriff, state police just set up checkpoints on all roads into town. They're citing ongoing gang." Activity as justification. And there's more. They're confiscating phones, computers, anything that might store evidence. They've got digital forensics teams with them. And there's the third mistake, Danny concluded, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They're moving too fast, getting sloppy. Wallace is worried about what we've uncovered. He's showing his hand. Agent Wilson's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Similar reports from other targeted towns. It's a coordinated effort to lock down potential evidence. They're trying to contain the spread of information. We've got reports of armed checkpoints in Willow Creek, Pine Junction, and Mesa Verde. Danny checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, mind racing through scenarios like he used to do before combat missions in far-off mountains. Martinez, get our surveillance feeds backed up to secure servers. All of them, including the backups. Of the backups, Thompson, activate our emergency communication network. They think they're containing us, but they've just proven everything we suspected. Linda rushed in, clutching her tablet, her face flushed with the same anger that had fueled her resistance to the Black Snakes. Sheriff, you need to see this. State News is running a story about ongoing criminal elements in Copper Creek. They're saying yesterday's incident proves we need state intervention. They're painting us as lawless, desperate for help. Of course they are, Danny said, his tactical training kicking in as he assessed the psychological warfare being deployed against his town. They're controlling the narrative, but we've got something they don't expect. He pulled up a map showing connections between targeted communities, each line representing a secure channel of communication they'd established during the fight. Against the Black Snakes, while they were watching us handle the gang, we were building a network. Every town they hit, every sheriff they tried to undermine, we're all connected now, and we've got proof of their entire operation. They'll try to discredit it, Agent Wilson warned, her FBI experience showing in her cautious approach. Call it conspiracy theories, small-town paranoia. They'll say we're resisting legitimate authority. Danny's response was cut short by the sound of helicopters overhead, their rotors beating the air like war drums. State police tactical units were deploying around Copper Creek, their show of force visible through the council room windows. The desert sun glinted off their tactical gear, turning them into dark mirrors of the gang they'd just defeated. Let them come, Danny said quietly, years of combat experience evident in his calm demeanor. Every move they make proves our case. The rookie sheriff they thought would fail against the Black Snakes is about to show them that sometimes the quickest draw isn't with a gun, it's with the truth. Thunder rolled across the Superstition Mountains as Copper Creek prepared for a different kind of showdown. This wasn't about outgunning criminals anymore. It was about exposing corruption that threatened the very heart of small-town America. The real test of Danny's abilities wasn't going to be his speed with a weapon. It would be his skill at turning Wallace's own tactics against him, using the very network of communities the Commissioner had tried to intimidate as the weapon that would bring him down. Commissioner Wallace's face filled every television screen in Rosa's diner, his emergency press conference broadcast statewide. The afternoon heat had driven many of Copper Creek's residents inside, and now they watched in silent anger as the man behind their troubles attempted to justify his actions. The diner's ancient swamp cooler fought a losing battle against the desert heat, but nobody seemed to notice. All eyes were fixed on the screens. The situation in Copper Creek represents a clear threat to public safety, Wallace declared, his practiced politician's smile never reaching his eyes. Each word was carefully chosen, wrapped in layers of bureaucratic justification. The presence of organized crime elements necessitates direct state oversight. The recent violence at a public event demonstrates the inability of local law enforcement to maintain order. We cannot allow small towns to become havens for criminal enterprises. Danny sat at the counter surrounded by his team, watching the commissioner dig his own grave with every carefully crafted lie. The diner had become their de facto command center, its seemingly innocent appearance masking a sophisticated intelligence operation. Behind the counter, beneath the smell of coffee and green chile, servers who doubled as surveillance operators monitored encrypted communications channels. "What he doesn't know," Agent Wilson said quietly, checking her secure phone, "is that while he's grandstanding, federal agents are executing search warrants across the state. Every shell company, every corrupt official, every piece of the network you helped us uncover, we're moving on all of it simultaneously." The paperwork just came through from 3 different federal judges. Danny holstered his weapon, the same one that had helped him stop the Black Snakes. But it wasn't his quick draw that would win this fight. It was the slow, patient building of trust, evidence, and community bonds that would bring down Wallace's corrupt empire. Each piece had been carefully positioned, like setting up a shot from 2 miles out. "Latest intel from our network," Chen reported, her laptop displaying encrypted messages from other targeted towns. The screen showed a complex web of communications, each line representing a community fighting back in its own way. "State police are facing unexpected resistance everywhere they go. Not violent, just organized non-compliance. Every search gets filmed, every interaction documented. They're drowning in paperwork and civilian oversight committees." In Mesa Verde, they tried to seize the town's communication equipment, Maria added with a satisfied smile. Found themselves facing a town hall full of retired lawyers, all demanding proper warrants and citing specific statutes. In Pine Junction, every business they tried to search suddenly needed emergency health inspections. All perfectly legal, all requiring state officer presence during the entire process. "Because they don't understand small towns," Jack interjected, his weathered face creasing with satisfaction. "They thought we'd either fight back or roll over. They never expected us to kill them with bureaucracy. Every town they targeted has decades of experience dealing with government overreach, mining permits, water rights, grazing fees. We know every regulation they have to follow." Thunder rolled across the desert as Danny studied the tactical map they'd created. Red dots showed state police positions around town, but blue dots, representing their own observers, surrounded each one. Every move the state made was being watched, recorded, and added to their growing mountain of evidence. The pattern was clear. Wallace's forces were deploying for maximum visibility, not maximum effectiveness. "Sir," Officer Rodriguez called, out from his observation post near the old water tower, his voice crackling through their secure radio network. "State Police Tactical Team is trying to access the county records office. They're claiming probable cause related to gang activity. Got at least 12 officers, full tactical gear." "Let them in," Danny replied, surprising some of his deputies. His response carried the same calculated precision he'd once used to plan. "Operations in mountain ranges halfway around the world, but make sure the clerk follows every single procedure. Every form in triplicate, every access logged, every document handled according to the strictest interpretation of state law." "Already on it," came the response, accompanied by the sound of shuffling papers. County clerks giving them a masterclass in proper documentation procedures. She's got the full records retention schedule out, insisting they sign for every single page they look at. They'll be there for hours. The strategy was working perfectly. While Wallace's forces focused on the obvious targets, police stations, government offices, communication centers, the real network of resistance operated through channels they'd never think to check. Every beauty salon, auto repair shop, and ranch house had become part of an intelligence-gathering operation that would have made Danny's old Special Forces commanders proud. "Report from Willow Creek," Chen announced, reading from an encrypted message. State police tried to seize their communication equipment, found themselves surrounded by a knitting circle. Dozen grandmothers, all filming with their phones while discussing their constitutional rights. Tactical team didn't know how to handle it. The video's already been uploaded to secure servers in 3 states. A small smile played across Danny's face. This was what Wallace had never understood. You couldn't intimidate people who'd spent generations facing down everything from armed bandits to flash floods. Copper Creek hadn't survived this long by being weak. They'd survived by being smarter than anyone gave them credit for. "Sheriff," Jack called out, entering the diner with fresh intelligence. His boots left dusty prints on the linoleum floor, marking his path from the observation post. He'd set up in the old church tower. "We just intercepted some interesting radio traffic. Wallace is coming personally, wants to oversee the operation himself. Got 3 helicopters incoming, full media presence." "Perfect," Danny replied, moving to their planning board. The wall-mounted display showed the layers of their defense, not barricades and weapons, but a complex web of legal observers, documentation teams, and communication networks. "He's getting desperate, making mistakes. Agent Wilson, how long?" "Until the FBI can move. We need another 12 hours to coordinate across all jurisdictions," she responded, her voice tight with professional tension. "Too many corrupt officials involved. We have to move on them all at once, or some might slip away. We've identified at least 30 state-level conspirators." Danny nodded, his tactical mind already formulating plans. "Then we give Wallace exactly what he expects, a small town scrambling to hide evidence. Let him think he's winning. Meanwhile, our real evidence is already secured and distributed across the network," Maria finished, understanding the strategy. "Every town has copies, all authenticated and time-stamped. Even if they shut down every computer in Copper Creek, they can't stop what's coming." The morning sun painted the Superstition Mountains in shades of fire as Commissioner Wallace's helicopter descended toward Copper Creek. Its rotors stirred up clouds of dust, creating a dramatic backdrop for the media crews he'd brought to document his triumph. Little did he know he was flying straight into a trap 5 months in the making. Danny watched from Rosa's diner as the state's motorcade rolled into town, their black SUVs gleaming like beetles in the desert sun. Every vehicle, every officer, every movement was being recorded from dozens of angles. Shop windows, doorways, and seemingly innocent smartphones, all feeding data to Chen's secure servers. "All observers in position," Maria reported through their encrypted channel. "Every corner covered, every interaction documented. State police have no idea they're surrounded by our people. Remember," Danny's voice carried across the radio network that connected not just Copper Creek, but all the targeted communities. "No resistance, no confrontation, just document everything. Let them think they're in control." Wallace stepped out of his lead vehicle, adjusting his tie as cameras flashed. He'd chosen his wardrobe carefully, an expensive suit that projected authority, but with a Western cut that was supposed to make him relatable to small-town folks. The effect was as artificial as his practiced smile. "Sheriff Hawkins," he called, out, as Danny emerged from the diner. "I trust you'll cooperate fully with our investigation into the ongoing criminal elements in your jurisdiction." Danny's response was measured, every word chosen to paint a picture for the cameras. "Of course, Commissioner. We're just a small town trying to do what's right. Though I'm curious about one thing. Did you coordinate with the Black Snakes before or after you arranged my appointment as sheriff?" Wallace's smile flickered for just a moment, but the cameras caught it. Behind him, his press pool suddenly paid closer attention. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Sheriff. We're here about your failure to maintain order, not your conspiracy theories." "Interesting choice of words," Danny replied, his voice carrying the same deadly calm he'd used before taking impossible shots in far-off mountains. Because I've got documented proof of every meeting between your office and the gang you sent to terrorize my town. Every payment, every order, every piece of military equipment you supplied them with. The commissioner's face hardened. That's a serious accusation, Sheriff, one that could end your career. Now step aside and let my people do their job. You mean like how you let the Black Snakes do their job? Danny gestured to the town around them. Look around, Commissioner. Really look. What do you see? Wallace glanced around, suddenly noticing what should have been obvious. Every window, every doorway, every vantage point held someone with a camera or phone. His tactical teams were surrounded, not by weapons, but by witnesses. Agent Wilson, Danny called out, I believe now would be a good time. The FBI agent stepped forward, her badge catching the morning light. Commissioner James Wallace, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and attempted subversion of local law enforcement. We have warrants being executed across the state. As we speak, this is absurd, Wallace sputtered, but his eyes told a different story as more FBI agents emerged from positions around the square. I'm here on official business. These are baseless accusations. Actually, Danny said, pulling out his phone. Everything's been documented. Would you like to see the video of you meeting with Marcus Cruz last month? Or maybe the financial records showing how you funneled military equipment to the Black Snakes? My personal favorite is the recorded call where you explained how terrorizing small towns would help push through your privatization bill. Thunder rolled across the desert as Wallace's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Across the state, similar scenes were playing out as federal agents moved against corrupt officials, compromised officers, and the network of criminals they'd employed. You don't understand what you've done, Wallace growled as Agent Wilson began, reading him his rights. The system works this way for a reason. Small towns like this need guidance, need control. No, Danny replied, his voice carrying across the now silent square. What we need is justice, and sometimes justice wears a small-town badge. The commissioner's own tactical teams stood down as FBI agents took control of the scene. The media crews that were supposed to document Wallace's triumph were instead capturing his downfall, broadcasting it live across the state. Sir, Chen called out from her position in the diner's command center. Reports coming in from everywhere. 37 arrests so far, including 12 senior state officials. The whole network is falling apart. Danny watched as Wallace was led away, his expensive suit now dusty from the desert wind. The morning sun caught his sheriff's badge, a reminder of why he'd chosen this path. It wasn't about being the fastest draw or the deadliest shot. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Sheriff, Agent Wilson said, returning, after Wallace was secured. The Bureau wants to thank you. Without your evidence, without the network you built between these towns, we never could have brought them down. Don't thank me, Danny replied, gesturing to the gathered townspeople emerging from their positions. Thank them. Wallace thought small towns were weak, isolated. He never understood that out here. Community isn't just a word, it's how we survive. The next few hours were a blur of activity as federal agents processed evidence, took statements, and documented the full scope of Wallace's conspiracy. But something else was happening too, something that would have longer-lasting effects than any arrest. Representatives from other targeted towns began arriving, drawn by the news of Wallace's arrest. They came to share stories, compare notes, and strengthen the bonds that had been forged in resistance. The network that had brought down corruption was transforming into something else, a coalition of small towns determined to protect their independence. You know what Wallace never figured out? Jack asked, joining Danny as they watched the sun set over the Superstition Mountains. He thought being a small-town sheriff was about maintaining order. He never understood it's about maintaining justice. 5 years later, The story of Copper Creek's resistance had become legend in law enforcement circles. The desert network of small-town cooperation had spread across multiple states, creating a new model of community policing that balanced local control with regional cooperation. Danny still kept his marksmanship sharp, still wore the badge with the same sense of duty, but his most powerful weapon had never been his quick draw or his tactical training. It had been his understanding that true strength comes not from fear or force, but from people standing together against injustice. The Black Snake Gang was long gone, their leaders serving time alongside the corrupt officials who had empowered them. Wallace watched his empire crumble from a federal prison cell, his dreams of power shattered by the very small towns he'd tried to control. But in Copper Creek, life went on. The morning sun still painted the desert in shades of gold, Rosa's coffee, still brought people together, and the badge that some had once mocked now stood for something more. A reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the fastest draw, but from the strongest community. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories of justice and courage. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought about Sheriff Danny Hawkins and the town that stood up against corruption.